true, then we can't have that. We can't have that. I understand that perhaps if you put the cooling towers or what have you inside the building.
Thanks for tuning into this special edition of RENSHAW Report. Marie I reporting from the city too tough to die in London. Our guest today is Gary Pivo. And Gary is from the town of East Lyme. He's running for the all-important zoning commission, a very qualified candidate, and I want to read you his resume so I don't screw it up like I just did, because I don't think there's anybody more qualified in any town more than Gary. Dr. Gary Pivo has lived part-time in East Lyme for the past few years and is now a full-time resident. He's retiring this December from his position at the University of Arizona as Professor of Urban Planning, Natural Resources, and Real Estate. This frees him up to do more in our region, so this fall he's running for the East Lyme Commission, Zoning Commission. Dr. Pivo is internationally recognized expert in urban sustainability, walkability, and social responsibility, real estate development, and he has helped dozens of communities manage their zoning open space, small town character, affordable housing, economic development, and other issues. He has also created and led a variety of planning-related organizations, from the local Friends of the San
Joaquin.
Jontine
Yeah.
Marsh to the Global Property Work Group for the UN Environmental Program. He is a former university department head and dean, and over the last several years, he has co-created the first mutual investment fund focused on sustainable real estate, which now invests over $300 million in the world's most sustainable real estate investments. Dr. Pivo, Gary, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Really looking forward to this election. I followed you a little bit through Facebook and social media. I find it very interesting, and thanks for moving to East Lyme full time. Thanks for coming on the show. So,
Very welcome.
Gary, how did you pick East Lyme? How did you end up here?
It is a geographic reality that my two grown kids live in Boston and New York City, and my wife and I therefore started looking to move halfway between them. And when we looked at all the towns from Guilford up to New London, we fell in love with East Lyme, the open space and the water and the village character, and it was just a great place to be.
So I'm between New London, Waterford, and East Lyme, Gary. I live in East Lyme. I spend most of my time in New London, and I love Waterford. And I've found over the years that I've never ever really appreciated where we live, but I do now. I think we have the most beautiful place in the world to live, with the resources we have in our backyard, and I am very appreciative of where I live now, and I think that's the case with many, many people. That being said, the work of the Zoning Commission is all important in every town and city for planning what's going to happen to the future of their respective towns. You have an extensive background. That's what your business is. Evidently, you getting involved in the political arena, you see some things that you didn't think were done or could have been done better. Could you identify what your issues with what's happened in East Lyme in the past are, and what you would propose to correct them?
Well, I really decided to run after I realized that there was some opportunities to increase the capacity of the Zoning Commission to make more sensitive and careful and considerate decisions. In particular, there was there's a project that's been approved downtown on Main Street that is going to eliminate 3 buildings, including Cafe Soul, which is a very popular outdoor cafe for the community. People love to meet there. And on that site, a building was approved that, as I looked into it, everybody complained about it being too big, too large, too much, out of character. So when I looked at it more closely, I discovered that there was a major error made by the commission, in which they simply broke their own rules, both pertaining to how big the building could be and how what kind of design and style it should have. And these are not small errors, they were very substantial errors, giving the project, for example, 60% more bedrooms, roughly 30% more housing units than really should have been allowed. And after they did that, I wrote them, and it turns out their attorney says they can't rescind their decision even if there was a mistake that was made. And so that error should have been caught. It was presented by the developer incorrectly, and no one on the commission recognized it was an error in connection with the code, but it was obvious to me. And so that's the kind of thing that I was concerned with. We ought to have some folks there that can catch those kind of errors and make sure those kind of things don't happen.
Direct responsibility for making an error like that. How can an error like that be made? There are rules, regulations, and policies that are written down. How could that possibly be an error?
Well, everybody on the commission and everybody on the staff has direct responsibility for making sure that what is said is correct in the testimony, and that the rules that are being met with. And nobody picked up on the error. I can't explain it exactly, other than the fact that I don't think folks were paying close enough attention or familiar enough with the rules. That's an example of the kind of thing I'm talking about.
The paper said, I believe, the paper said that the facts were misrepresented by the developers. If that's the case, isn't that a legal reasoning for not being able to rescind it? I mean,
yes, it is.
We're in East Lyme, not New London.
I know. Yes, it's true that the facts were misrepresented, and the development representative, the engineer, told the commission that there was enough room on the site to build that three-story building, and that.
Who was the engineer?
The name of the engineer? Yeah. I don't recall the gentleman's name, but he mistakenly represented the requirements that were that applied to the project, and said that the project would fit on the site when it really did not. And but one town attorney that this was referred to said, well, for various legal reasons, that once you've made a decision, you cannot take it back. I'm not sure that's true. I know that North Branford, for example, is a town that has had obtained a legal opinion that did allow them to reverse a mistake like that. So I think it depends. It's a debatable issue that maybe it would be best decided by a judge.
So when the project is built, does it still have to comply with rules and regulations, or is it allowed to proceed with the
Unfortunately, mistakes? I think that it may well be allowed to proceed with this mistake. In other words, ending up much bigger than it should be, much bigger than people in town felt it would fit. And so it may well be allowed to proceed. However, there is a rule in the state law that says a building permit, which is the last thing that's issued before the demolition starts and the construction begins, that the building permit has to be consistent with the zoning, and a finding has to be made that it is. Well, if you follow my logic, it really still is not consistent with the zoning. An earlier permit for the site plan and the allowable use was issued, but inconsistently with the zoning. So there may be another argument to make. So it also might be possible that if folks like myself are elected, that we would be able to act to rescind the earlier permit because of the error, and defend that from a legal point of view, because like I said, I think the legal issues are debatable.
Social media keeps many of us informed on both sides of the issue. I enjoy reading the positions of other people, what they're thinking. There was a great deal of response to that decision with regard to that project. Is that the project that that made you make the leap into?
That was one of
zoning?
them. There were some others too. For example, right now there's a very large apartment development on Bridebrook Road that's going in. That road had historically been, and most all of that road is zoned for rural residential, low density, rural countryside kind of road. And right along that road now we have a large apartment building, actually a series of apartment blocks that is about, I think, 80 units going in there. They clear cut that parcel and are putting in that, and a lot of folks find that to be objectionable.
Is that consistent with the plan of development?
It's inconsistent with the plan of conservation development, which shows that area to be rural, but that project went in anyway. Because of the state law that allows affordable housing projects to override local zoning. I looked into that state law though, and I found that that the town has an option to take back local control by demonstrating that over the last many years they have developed affordable housing in town that fits a certain criteria for what it means to be affordable. And if they had applied for that, there would be a moratorium on these kinds of projects, but no one ever did that either. So again, I found what I consider to be a lack of capacity or a lack of initiative or an error in judgment where we could have done better and we could have prevented that from happening.
Challenge from the sitting zoning commission with regard to rebuffing this project?
They did make an effort and they were able to reduce the size of the project by leaving roughly half the land in open space there. But the project is clustered along the road, and it looks very much like a large apartment project, multi-building apartment project right on this rural road.
If I understand you correctly, the way around the local zoning is the state requirement for affordable housing that they pose as affordable housing, and that's how they beat the local zoning.
That's correct. That's correct. And it's very difficult. That program, that state program, allows a developer to appeal very rapidly to a judge if the local community votes to deny. And so it's very difficult, even when they do deny the permits, although in this case they didn't. They approved the project ultimately, even though with conditions and with improvements, but it's still a large apartment project on the rural road, which is not what is compatible with the town plan. It's very difficult to successfully withstand an appeal to the state judge because the way the law is written, it's very difficult for the community to make the case that they should have been allowed to deny it, unless you've shown that you've built a certain amount, and we have built that much affordable housing. And if you have built that much, then you get a 4-year moratorium during which time you can work on your affordable housing supply in your community, and you don't have to be overrun by projects that developers propose that are not consistent with your local zoning. So I wondered, when I saw that, why the heck haven't we made an application for that moratorium under the state law, which would have given us that window of opportunity to get back control over what's going on in our community.
And have you ever questioned the board, the sitting board?
I have.
As to why?
I have written the board about a lot of these issues, and I have indicated to at least one of the commissioners that this is a pathway, and I've also explained this to the zoning administrator that this is a pathway, and I've encouraged them to apply for this right away, not waiting for me to get elected or anything like that. Let's just get on with it and apply for this opportunity, this moratorium, so we don't keep having to deal with these affordable housing projects that are in these rural areas that are difficult for us to manage and that override our town plan and our local zoning. I'm not against, I am for. I think we need to provide sufficient affordable housing, but I would put it in the areas that we have planned for development, where we want more population growth, where we want infill, where we have community services and transit services and infrastructure, not in the rural countryside. I think that was an error in the state law when they wrote it, that they really should carve out and say the rural countryside in Connecticut is not the place for affordable housing, but in the parts of towns that are suitable for development, yes, let's be more open to these kind of projects.
Gary, there was something today in the paper that referenced the Hathaway property purchase.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that, and is it an issue?
Yeah, the Hathaway property is about 130 acres on Lake Patagonia. It has been for many years the #1 priority for the open space preservation advocates in East Lyme, and it is the #1 open space acquisition target in the town's 2020 Plan of Conservation and Development. So it is absolutely a priority for protection. And so the land became available for purchase, and it eventually got into the hands of the East Lyme Land Trust. The East Lyme Land Trust borrowed money to be able to do that. They've now turned to the town of East Lyme to purchase it from them and put it aside in permanent preservation. That, together with a state grant, is going to allow the land to become permanently protected. There's been negotiations going on for a couple of years almost now to make this deal happen. There was a hearing after last night, and it looks like the town council has at least initially voted to go forward with this purchase, and I'm quite happy about it. They're going to pay, according to their appraisals, basically 75 cents on the dollar of the value of this property, for this property. So it's a good deal for them. And if you don't just look at it from a real estate point of view, but if you look at it from an open space ecosystem services point of view, where you also value things like the water supply and the pollution control and the climate management and the aesthetics and the recreation and the wildlife habitat that you get from all of that, the value is even higher than the real estate value. And so they really end up, in that case, paying more like 15 cents on the dollar. And on top of that, when you have this open space protected, property values go up and the competitiveness of the town improves, because small towns attract investors and investment and new residents and a new business because they're wonderful and beautiful places to live. That's their competitive advantage compared to the big city. And so this is a great deal for the town, and I'm really hoping that in the end the people will vote for the bond issue that we need to pass to make this deal go through. And along with that, the Land Trust has decided to turn over a couple of additional properties, so it's really a 3-for-1 deal. The town, for the same price, is going to get all those properties. It's a great deal all around.
Is there a solution to Oswegatchie Hills debacle?
You're talking about the landmark development proposal, the most recent. That's been going on since like 2004, so like 20 years now. Landmark development, developer Mr. Russo has been proposing various kinds of development projects. Most recently, they've proposed a roughly 800 unit, again, one of these state-mandated affordable housing projects, as a way to override a lot of the local control over what happens there. It's a very difficult situation insofar as I was explaining, the state rules limit the amount of the degrees of freedom, the discretion the town has to regulate and control what they can do and can't do and what they can say no to and so forth. You know, people are still looking for a solution where a lot of folks would like to see 100% of that, I think it's 236 acre Oswegatchie Hill property stay in permanent open space. It's a beloved piece of land. It's part of, it could be an extension of the Oswegatchie Hills Preserve. It's sensitive with respect to the preservation of water quality and in the Niantic River and so forth. So how might you get to it being 100% open space? There have been efforts by community leaders, town leaders, to find the money for the purchase of that. So far, they've been unsuccessful to do that, but I think they haven't necessarily tried everything. For example, maybe between the folks in East Lyme and the folks in Waterford who are overviewing the Oswegatchie Hills, some kind of an open space conservation district can be established. Something like, let's just say, maybe $500 per household per year over a 10-year period could be a special levy on property that would allow the money to be obtained to acquire that. Maybe considerably less than $500 a year if we can combine that with some state grants or private donations, or even if we can do some other kinds of innovative things like allow the developer to sell some of his development capacity to other projects elsewhere in town.
Whose job is it to negotiate a settlement of a project of this scale?
Well, I would say mostly the first selectman and the selectmen.
So, Gary, I've been around a little bit. Seems like I've been hearing about this for too long,
Yeah.
which leads me to the conclusion it's an expensive argument.
Yes.
Why has it taken so long on both sides of the issues to appease everybody and move ahead or behind or somehow come to a conclusion? Why has it taken so long? Is it a political maneuver, or is it from academia, or is it one side unwilling to negotiate?
Budge? Yeah. This is a tough question to answer. Why it's taken so long? I mean, I know the most recent legal case was in the same court for like 6 years. So
That's expensive.
Yes, when these things get into the court situation, things get very expensive. Things can take a great long time. And then when they're in that setting, it's very difficult to get the parties to come to the table for that sort of thing. I'm a big believer in negotiation and mediation, and I'm not sure the parties on all sides have had enough of an opportunity to sit together, learn from each other, explore creative ideas about how to compensate the developer for the investment that he's made, but or come up with a development plan for perhaps a much more limited part of the project that is not visually prominent and that might be compatible, although it might be infeasible. But I think that we should be looking for pathways. I'd like to see us find a solution to that.
Am I incorrect in my assumption that the developer is using the Affordable
Housing
Affordable
law.
Housing Act to circumvent the
No,
zoning regulations?
That's correct. That the original zoning on that land was 1 house per 4 acres, and now what's proposed is more like 4 apartments for each of the 260 acres. But they're really just proposing an even denser concentration in just 36 acres. What's interesting is right now the proposal is 800 units on 36 of the 236 acres. And you could imagine where if that was done and the rest of it was left in open space, in some situations that might be considered a reasonable result. You have 85% of the property saved in open space, 15% of the property developed, but exactly where they want to put that is visually quite prominent to the folks that are living nearby. And so it would be very difficult to understand how you could do that in a way that still would garner broad support, especially from the folks in Waterford and East Lyme who would see that. It might be able to be designed in such a way that has 0 runoff and discharge into Niantic River, and therefore maybe some of the water quality issues can be reasonably well addressed. But it's a sticky wicket because it's a complex, difficult development location. And so ultimately it may well be the case that the best solution is 100% open space. And to do that, we may be able to convince the state court and so forth that it can be denied or cut down even with the affordable development law in place that's there that sort of works against us. But on the other hand, it might be that we have to find some other form of compensation to convince, to acquire the development rights, transfer the development rights to other locations in town, buy the land, that sort of thing. And that's going to take effort probably by taxpayers in town, and maybe in the neighboring town of Waterford, who will also benefit greatly from this, perhaps also together with regional and state dollars too, to finally resolve this matter. But I think time's getting closer and closer because the judge has, in the most recent case, said that the town will need to take a look at the next stage of the application process, most likely. And so we're getting closer and closer to actually the town having to make a decision one way or another on the project.
You know, this election has many issues to discuss and really shows the importance of the zoning board's election. As luck would have it, the data center came to light today in the paper. The day paper had an article today. What are your thoughts on the data center? I wouldn't think East Lyme would be involved with it, but
it's come up, and folks in East Lyme are now getting engaged in that decision. It's I think roughly a 2-story, 1 million square foot project right next to the power plant, the Dominion power plant, and folks are concerned about the environmental impacts of that project. 1 million square feet is a large building. It's like a 60-story office tower laid on its side. It's a big, large building, and people have started talking about the potential impacts. The one that scares me the most, that I've heard about, that seems most concerning so far, is the noise concern. Apparently, these data centers require substantial cooling towers or cooling systems that can generate noise. And if they're not enclosed inside the building, that noise potentially can be heard maybe for miles away. And that's what people are concerned about, particularly in East Lyme.
Now, with regard to that, we did an exclusive interview with Rob Brule, first selectman from Waterford, and he assured me that
it wouldn't be the case.
Noise wouldn't be the case.
Yeah.
How to convey that to the people is a different problem, but
yeah, sure.
I agree with you that it's a consideration.
Yeah.
And if it affects one person,
Yeah.
I love the tax dollars. You know, it would be the second highest
Yeah.
taxpayer in the town of Waterford.
Yeah.
But I don't think anybody should be
Yeah.
subjected to
People
noise
are
of any
people are
kind.
concerned about other impacts like traffic, particularly during the construction process and all the trucks and all the workers coming and going. And there may be ways to better manage that. To be honest, too, data centers are part of the internet, and they're an important piece of our national infrastructure. We use them all the time, all of us, when we use our computers, but they use a tremendous amount of power, of energy. To have them locate in next to the nuclear power plant that has a minimal or no carbon footprint means that it's going to be an energy source powering that's not going to have a negative impact on climate change, which is important as compared to it locating somewhere else where the grid has a higher carbon footprint. And also, when you transmit energy, you lose a lot of it in the transmission process as it travels over wires for miles and miles. If it's right next to the source, you lose less energy, so there's some efficiency gains there. So it's not necessarily a bad idea to have it effectively attached to the nuclear power plant like that.
Do you support nuclear power?
It's hard for me to do that because I grew up with the concern about the 3 Mile Island meltdown and the problem of what do we do with the nuclear waste.
Do you support windmills?
But I am quite concerned. Obviously, one of the great existential threats to our planet and even our community is sea level rise and climate change. And so I certainly support all the alternatives, solar and windmill and nuclear that are zero carbon and other things that are people come up. Every one of them has some concerns attached to it. Windmills, the problem of birds or visuals. Solar, what happens to the landscape under the plant. Nuclear, what do we do with the waste? Though I'm understanding that they're getting better and better at nuclear power that is but I'm no expert on that, so I should be careful that I don't misinform folks about it. But yes, I'm very supportive of zero carbon emissions in our grid.
You know, I don't want to bring up those thieves known as Eversource with regard into this problem. So let's stay away from that because
Okay.
that'd be too negative. You're not ready for that yet. Let's talk about what's happening to the town of East Lyme. I see a much different East Lyme than I did 40 years ago naturally, because 40 years ago, the town went to sleep in the wintertime. You very seldom saw a car on Main Street. Didn't appreciate it then, but I appreciate it now. What I see in the town, I don't like. I'm very concerned with. I live on the Flanders end of town. I think what's going on there is a complete disaster. What do you see happen to our town, and what direction should we be going in? Should there be a change? Is change needed?
Well, change is happening, change is needed, it's all true. I do think that the town has been discovered. The growth in jobs in New London makes the town a bedroom community to employment centers. There's going to be a demand for new housing development in the area. Also, people from New York City and other places have always recognized it, but are increasingly seeing it as a place to live, especially when you might want a second home or you might be able to work from home. And so, there are pressures on the town. And so this raises questions of traffic and of preserving historic buildings and small town character and open space. and providing enough infrastructure. And so all of these changes are afoot. It's you know it's very difficult to stop any form of investment or development or change, or but at the same time we do have a plan for conservation and development. We do have a zoning code. It is at our discretion to decide whether or not to change the zoning to allow for a Costco or some other large project that isn't automatically allowed under the zoning. And I think we have to be very careful that the style of development we permit follows the traditions and characters that people have come to the town to because they love that. And that raises the question of how do we keep the place, keep the small town and rural character. And I don't think we have the formula just right in terms of the rules that we have in place for that. We need to do a lot more thinking about what kind of buildings are appropriate, how large, what scale, where located, so that we can sort of recreate the eclectic, historic, human-scaled, small-scaled, walkable character of the village, or the sort of rural country road character of Boston Post Road and the Flanders area that people really love. And that's going to take a lot people commitment and some real thinking about what kind of rules we're going to need to put in place.
Do you see a demand for that? People.
Absolutely.
People of East Lyme, they love East Lyme,
Yeah.
regardless of what the issue is. The guy who's against something I'm for, or vice versa, they love the town of East Lyme, just like any other town. There is room for improvement, but how do we make that improvement?
Yeah, well, you have to have in place a set of guidelines or standards and a procedure for working with investors and developers so that the products that they create are compatible with what we already have and what we really love. And so that includes making sure that the architecture is not too big and fits the style of what's already there, that we find a way to preserve the many historic homes that are there, because they add tremendously to the traditional character of the place, that as we grow we make sure that we are providing bikeways and walkways and sidewalks for people to be able to have these walkable neighborhoods. But there's also room for fitting in some new housing and some new folks into the various parcels that are around town that are available, or even maybe changing them to allow for more development, because that brings more people and more vitality and more shoppers and more neighbors and more pedestrians that make the place a vital and pleasant place to be. And so this kind of balanced and managed approach to growth and development is, I think, something we have to be very clear about what it is we want and what it is we don't want. We have to base it on our plan. The areas that we want to have open space, we have to be committed to that. The areas that have beautiful views, we need to understand what makes those views and protect those. Our waterways and our wildlife habitats, the same. Our villages and their traditional historic character, also. We have to be very clear about what are the character-giving elements that we love and identify those and go about preserving them.
What's your campaign strategy, Gary? How are you going to get the people to? It's a lot of work to get elected to a thankless job that's so important.
It's true. It's true. You're asking the question of how do you communicate with people who are so very, very busy all the time. I have been writing some letters to the editor in hopes that people read the newspaper. I've also taken on to Facebook because, and we happen to in East Lyme have a couple of rather well subscribed to Facebook pages, such as The East Lyme Community Forum, which last I checked has something like 9,000.
Really?
Yeah, 9,000 members. You know. So when you, so I wrote one post on there to introduce myself to the community, and I've had well over 100 comments. And I've responded to all those comments, and a similar number of likes. And I'm hoping that that sort of social media interchange will allow me to let people ask me questions and get to know what I'm thinking about, and give people specific answers to their questions. So if people want to, engage with me directly and ask their questions about East Lyme or any of these issues, please just look for Gary Pivo on Facebook, and you'll probably find that particular discussion. And it's open, and I really am responding to every post that people are making.
Gary, is there any other issue you'd like to talk about before we close out this segment?
Well, I think not. I think we've covered things very well, and so I just want to thank you, and I want to encourage everybody to engage in the election, and because ultimately, their town is their town, and what I really want most is to hear from folks what it is they're looking for, and look for creative ways to make those things happen.
One last question that I got asked. This project on I-95, which is taking over the town right now.
I-95. Oh, the
Exit 74 and
the highway improvement project.
Yeah. As a professional and an intelligent man, what's your take on it? I think it's an abortion. I got to be honest with you. I think it's a tragedy that they took valuable property, like the gas station and those properties on the other side of the road, and they're making a parking lot out of it. I mean, it's just atrocious. Like, I can't buy. I've heard from town officials that it's a great project and something that we should be very happy to get. I think it's bullshit, Gary. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I think it's one of my main peeves and why I say they're ruining the town. Correct my ignorance, if you would.
My understanding is the idea is they want to have more modern on-ramps and off-ramps, and that somehow the weaving and merging situation on I-95 there has been problematic.
Do you think it was
I don't know
Costco?
that. I don't.
Do you think it's because of Costco?
Well, Costco has likely added traffic to those off-ramps and on-ramps, but I'm really not, I haven't looked up the data, so I'm not sure, but I really haven't heard a lot about traffic accidents and problems right there, such that we really need to modernize something that was more or less working.
Exit 74 and 74 going out toward New London is very difficult to get on. There have been a lot of accidents there. I want safety, but it seems that we could get safety a lot cheaper than a 4-year project and property takings as they've done it. I don't know. It's just bothersome.
I agree with you that there's hardly anything. There's nothing more important than keeping our drivers and folks safe.
And that gas station doesn't make any sense to me either.
Well, maybe not, but the gas station is another related project. The thing about the gas station, as I understand it, is that people are not happy about it. They're concerned about its impact on the Nyannick River. I understand that that's a concern, but at the same time, what was there before was kind of a leaky mess, causing problems in the river.
I love it though.
Yeah.
I mean, I go in there every day.
Oh, do you? You're using it.
I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful project. But nothing makes sense to me. Dr. Gary Pivo, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure. You got my vote. And
Thank
I
you,
would
sir.
tell anybody out there to consider Dr. Pivo for the position of the zoning commission in the town of East Lyme, because he's certainly a more than qualified candidate. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.